اهلا بيكم. انا فيولا حنا وويلكم لردك عندنا. النهارده عندنا شو لذيذ جدا. عندنا استاذ جون موركوس، هو محامي وبيتخصص في bankruptcies وتراست وويلز. طبعا احنا هنعرف ايه هم دول وهيفيدونا ازاي لما نتعلم عليهم، وهو هيقول لنا الديتيل ايه كل حاجه بتتعمل ازاي وايه فايدتها. انا هحاول طبعا اقول لكم كل حاجه بالعربي، بس العربي بتاعي يعني هحاول to translate هو بيقولوا ايه. فهنتضير دلوقتي لجون and welcome him.
Thank you very
Hi,
much.
John. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Pleasure to be here.
And your name is John Morkos, and you are an attorney.
I am an attorney.
And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been practicing law for a few years. I used to work for a bigger firm in the past for about 6 years. And for the past couple of years, I've actually opened up my own office and have my own practice here in Irvine, where I practice a wide area of areas of the law.
Wonderful.
But my primary practice is bankruptcy and estate planning, wills and trusts, as you said.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, as you said.
So we want to know bankruptcy. So for somebody that doesn't know what a bankruptcy is, and it's probably the best thing for him, how would you explain what is a bankruptcy?
A bankruptcy is basically a legal tool available to everybody, whether it's an individual or a business. It allows people in financial hardships, whether it's from medical bills, credit cards, issues with their house, foreclosures. It allows them to start over and to reorganize their finances so that they can move forward and put that behind them.
يعني بيقول chapter 13 و 7 صح؟ chapter 13 and 7 دي طريقة اللي الواحد ممكن ياخد الديون اللي عليه ويعمل حاجة بيهم، يا إما chapter 13 يا إما chapter 7 علشان to get rid of these debts, right?
Correct.
That's what you use to get rid of these debts. الديون دي ممكن طب what does that mean, get rid of your debts?
So it really depends on what chapter you're talking about. As you said, there's two types of chapters, 7 and a 13. A 7 is a complete liquidation. All your unsecured debt, your credit cards, your medical bills, they all disappear.
يعني unsecured, what does unsecured debt mean exactly?
Unsecured debt means that there's no security to some type of piece of property. For instance, if you have a car loan, usually that loan is tied into a car.
Right.
If you have a mortgage, it's tied into a house. Those are secured. Unsecured is your credit card bills, your medical bills,
Okay.
things of that nature.
So you can get rid of all of that.
With a chapter 7, you can wipe it all away.
Okay, يعني chapter 7 الديون لو هي مش ماسكة في بيت ولا في عربية ولا حاجة دي ممكن to put it in the bankruptcy and they don't have to pay it again.
Correct.
Or any more. Okay.
Correct.
All right, so that's chapter 7.
Right.
Okay, so what's the difference now for chapter 13?
So a chapter 13, ultimately it's going to relieve you of your debt, but it does it in a different way. It's really a debt restructuring. So what they do is they group your debt together. They look at your income, they look at your expenses, they look at your assets, and they determine a payment plan where you would pay pennies on the dollar of all your debt for, let's say, 5 years, and after the expiration of the 5 years, all your debt would disappear at that point.
Okay, so chapter 13 بياخدوا كل الديون اللي عليكم وبعدين بيخلوكم تدفعوها little by little، يعني بيدوكم 5 سنين تدفعوهم until you're paid off. Well, how about if in 5 years can you pay off all of your debt that you owe?
That's the key. You don't pay it all off. What they do is they determine, based on your income and your expenses, they'll make a payoff pennies on the dollar. Let's say for every $1,000 you owe, you pay $200. So they would spread it among 5 years, and upon the expiration of the 5 years, your remaining balance would disappear. You wouldn't be paying it all back.
Okay, so the bankruptcy would negotiate your debt.
Exactly.
Okay, so the bankruptcy ده بيدفعوا انت قلت like 70% of
It varies from client to client. It could be 10 cents on the dollar. It could be 50 cents on the dollar. Again, it depends on how much money you're bringing in and how much money you're spending on your expenses. And
And that would include your house, your cars, your credit cards.
Sure, and that's a whole nother topic to discuss. You have the option of keeping your car, keeping your house. Some people, especially nowadays with the economy, they have negative equity. They owe way more than their property's worth, and sometimes they just want to walk away from it, and that's what bankruptcy is for. It allows you to surrender the house and just walk away from the debt associated with it.
Okay, now how بيقول بيدوكم فرصة to start all over. يعني it really gives you a chance اللي انت تبتدوا من جديد. It's a good way to get rid of the debt that you can't afford anymore, basically. And so, when do you think a person needs to file a Chapter 13?
Well, typically, a Chapter 13 is probably somebody who wants to keep their property and can't afford to keep the property and the debt. And they need to have some type of consolidation so that they can, move forward from there. When you have income coming in and not enough to cover your expenses every month, that's when you're ready for either a Chapter 7 or a 13 bankruptcy.
And how long does a bankruptcy last on your record?
So typically bankruptcies stay on your record for, it's about 8 to 10 years. A lot of people think that once you file bankruptcy, you're not going to qualify for credit cards, for cars, for houses. It's completely not true. It's completely fiction. I have clients, right when they get their discharge, right when their bankruptcy's over, they're getting credit card offers immediately.
How long after filing do you get discharged?
So it's a good question. Chapter 7, about 5 months. Chapter 13, about 5 years.
Okay, and so discharge, what does that mean exactly?
Discharge means the bankruptcy court approved your bankruptcy and allowed all your debt to be discharged, to be dismissed.
Okay, and it takes about 5 months for Chapter 7.
Right.
What about Chapter 13?
Chapter 13 is about 5 years. Again, they put you on a payment plan, and you have to make these payments every month until the expiration of the 5 years.
Okay, so at what stage would a person decide they need a bankruptcy? I mean, and then how will they know which one is best for them and their situation?
Very good question. It really depends on their finances. I mean, obviously people know that they need to have some type of help, whether it's a bankruptcy or whether it's debt negotiation or a loan mod. There's a certain amount of money coming in, but way more that's due every month. So those are the type of people that would need to file bankruptcy. Whether they file a Chapter 7 or a 13, it really depends on their income. With a Chapter 7, that's the most common type of bankruptcy. It's quick, you get a complete discharge of your debt, and for the most part, you get to keep all your assets. So, go ahead.
No, go ahead. So هو بيقول Chapter 7 أسهل, and it's what, quicker to get discharged, and you get rid of, بتشيلوا كل الديون اللي عليكم أسرع. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. So, let me try to understand. So if I have a house and I can't afford it anymore, but I don't want to lose it. But I can't afford everything else. I can't afford my credit cards or my medical bills or any of this stuff, but I want to keep my house. Which bankruptcy should I file?
So that's the typical situation. It's the typical client that comes into my office, wants to keep their house, but obviously wants to get rid of their debt. You have to qualify for a Chapter 7. Usually that's the first place we'll start. It's the easier bankruptcy, it's the cheaper bankruptcy, and you're done within 5 months. But you have to qualify. It's based on your income, it's based on your expenses, it's based on how many people you have in your household. There's a lot of factors that come into that determine whether you qualify for a 7. And if you don't, your next step would be a Chapter 13.
And what are the qualifications to be approved for a Chapter 7?
So the bankruptcy court has established guidelines. They determine first whether you're married. They determine next whether you have any dependents. Based on that, there's a set annual income that you need to be within, and if you're over it, if you make too much, that's when you don't qualify. But there's a lot of factors that go into it. I mean, there's they look at expenses such as your student loans, your mortgage, expenses, for childcare, home expenses, business expenses.
It almost sounds like a loan modification.
It really jumps into your finances and determines whether you're a perfect candidate.
Right.
For the most part, people who can't afford to keep their expenses or who are too upside down are going to qualify. And there's ways to get people to qualify for a Chapter 7.
Okay, and Chapter 13. So which one are you, would you normally recommend to your clients?
Well, typically I don't recommend bankruptcy off the top.
Okay.
I mean, that to me is an extreme solution to a problem. Sometimes there's easier solutions. You mentioned a loan mod. Typically people are coming in because they're having issues with their home loans being upside down, and sometimes a loan mod is the easier solution. There's also debt negotiation. A lot of times, if you're behind on your credit card bills, they'd be willing to accept a settlement. If you want to offer them, 40 cents on the dollar, you can offer them 40 cents on the dollar, and for the most part, they'll take it.
So do you do that? When a client comes and he doesn't qualify, or maybe that's not the best route for him, it's to file bankruptcy, do you have a service that you do that for them? You negotiate the creditors and...
Of course, with every client that comes in my door, I analyze their finances and determine what the best route would be. I mean, if somebody comes in with 30 credit cards, obviously it wouldn't be feasible and financially sound for them to hire anybody to negotiate 30 credit cards. If they have just a couple credit cards, it might be cheaper and quicker just to negotiate these types of debt and avoid the whole bankruptcy on their credit.
Are there any other types of bankruptcies?
Just Chapter 7 and 13 for individuals. There's obviously other types of bankruptcies for businesses, but my focus is mainly Chapter 7 and 13.
I see. Okay, so here I've written a couple of questions that I'd like to ask you. Does filing my bankruptcy make me a bad person?
Not at all. It's a constitutional right. Honestly, it's been so commonplace with the market crashing, with people getting laid off, with people's hours getting cut. It's a very, very common situation. I have people coming in my doors that were making a lot of money, and they had a lot of property, and now because of the way the economy has turned, this is their only option. So
it's not a way out where people just use it and they go and they abuse the system
Yeah, not at all. And there's safeguards in place. The bankruptcy court obviously is aware of different reasons for filing bankruptcy, and they want to make sure that the petitions that do come in are correct. I mean, they want to make sure people are doing it for the right reason.
So when do you recommend, like, let's say somebody owes $10,000 in credit cards. Would he be a good candidate? Would you recommend for somebody that owes $10,000 to file bankruptcy if he absolutely cannot have or pay that off?
If it comes to the point where, again, a certain amount of money is coming in and it's not enough to cover the expenses, eventually you're going to have to file. So
when is it not a good, I mean, if you're in debt for $5,000, then it's not worth filing bankruptcy? Or, I mean, at what point, at what deep trouble do you have to be to seek bankruptcy? I mean, there's people out there that are in debt up to their ears with their properties, and there are some that file bankruptcy when they really don't even have any assets. So at what point do you say, okay, now this is time to file for bankruptcy?
Again, every case is absolutely different. I mean, some people come in because they incurred a lot of unexpected medical expenses that weren't covered by insurance. I have some that, have financed remodeling of their house, which is now underwater, and now they have this debt to pay off and no equity to match it. Every case is different. Like I said, it's something we have to we have to sit down, look at all the finances coming in, all the expenses going out, and figure out in the long term, is it better for them to file now so they can start fresh and start rebuilding, or is there, an end in sight, and eventually they'll get caught up and pay their bills. So it's something you have to analyze case by case. But ultimately, that's what it comes down to. If there's absolutely no way you're going to ever get caught up, then this is probably going to be your best option.
So what if somebody tries to do the loan modification and that's it, they're about to foreclose? Is there a way to save this home through bankruptcy?
Sure, and that, again, is a very common situation. There's a lot of foreclosures going on, and it's just come down to people can't afford to keep this property, or sometimes they just don't agree with the fair market value of the property compared to what they owe. So they try loan mods. A lot of times banks tell them they need to stop making payments on their loan in order to start qualifying, which I believe is very bad advice, because as soon as you stop making payments, they put you in default and ultimately they'll foreclose.
Right.
So bankruptcy does stop that. Bankruptcy stops any type of credit, any type of creditor contacting you, collecting, lawsuits, foreclosure.
Okay, so let's say you got a notice of default. Okay, you haven't been making your payments for so long, and now the bank is saying we're going to foreclose. So at this point, would it be wise to file bankruptcy to stop the foreclosure from happening?
It's all about strategy. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the only way to stop a foreclosure, unless you do negotiate some type of loan modification in the process, or if you do a reinstatement of your loan, which is paying the deficiency, because ultimately that's what the bank wants. They want whatever was back due.
أنا نسيت خالص أقول لكم بالعربي كل الحاجات اللي هو بيقولها لأن it's very interesting طبعا. Basically أقول لكم I'm gonna have to explain now. So basically نقول من الأول chapter 13 بيدوكم فرصة اللي تحطوا include أي حاجة عاوزينها أو أي حاجة مش قادرين تدفعوها ممكن تدفع، والحاجات اللي انتوا عاوزينها ممكن تخلوها مثلا زي البيت والعربية والحاجات دي تخلوها في you don't include it in the bankruptcy that's basically what it means in chapter 13.
You have an option even with a 7, whether you want to give it up or keep it.
Sure. فchapter 13 بتعمل كده. chapter 7 برضو نفس الحاجة، بس هو قال chapter 7 أسرع وأسهل وأرخص.
Very much so.
And it could be وبعدين you get rid of الديون دي بتتشال، لما بتتشال خالص. في chapter 13 الديون بتبقى لسه عليكم بس بيدوكم فرصة ايه تدفعوها over 5 سنين ولا حاجة. So that's basically what we covered.
Perfect.
And then we also talked about سألته لو أنا عملت bankruptcy يعني ده بيخليني واحدة مش كويسة ولا يعني is it فقال لا not necessarily طبعا، لأن this is البانكربسي محطوط for that reason. الناس اللي هم مش قادرين على كل الديون اللي عليهم طب هيعملوا ايه، فدي حاجة كويسة قوي اللي it's an option طبعا. it's definitely an option. It's not a solution ولا حاجة هي يعني it's not detrimental. مش هي دي الحاجة الوحيدة اللي ممكن تعملوها. that's just another option. اللي هي 7 or 13. Also, I wanted to ask, you also specialize in estate planning. What does estate planning mean?
Estate planning is merely, a lot of people know it as having a will or a trust. Those are the two types of estate planning documents there are. So it's basically stating when I pass, I want my property to go to these people. That's ultimately what it accomplishes. Now, there's a will and there's a trust. There's two types of different documents. They both do it in different ways.
So a will, hold on, will, عاوز أقول الwill بس I can't find my earpiece. يلا معلش. الwill is it's a document ورقة بتعملها and you include all of your assets. كل الحاجات اللي الواحد عنده بيته وفلوسه والاكاونتس بتاعه كل حاجة بتبقى محطوطة في الwill.
Right.
Okay. And what about the trust?
The trust is the same thing. Again, it's something you establish during your lifetime. It basically states, I want all my assets to be owned by the trust. And
We have technical problems.
there you go.
There
you
we
got
go.
it.
Sorry, folks.
So a will needs to be probated is ultimately what the difference is. You know, a probate is a court proceeding where your will is taken to court, and the court has to distribute your assets according to your wishes. A trust avoids all that altogether. Probate is costly, time consumption.
يعني ايه بقى probate? What does probate mean?
Probate it's a legal proceeding in court where, for instance, if somebody passes away and they have a will, their children would take the will to court and have a judge order that these properties be distributed according to their wishes.
So a will لازم تروح through court, right? It has to go through court.
Correct.
And a trust does not.
A trust does not. That is the biggest difference between the two. So yeah, and another thing is there's usually statutory fees with the will. In other words, the court orders that a percentage of your estate goes to attorneys for probating your estate. So off the top, some of your assets are given to attorneys and ultimately not to who you wanted it to go to.
So why would anybody choose a will over a trust?
You know, I ask myself that all the time. And
Is it because of the amount of money? Is a trust only good for a certain amount of assets, or?
Not at all. Not at all. And it's mainly because people aren't aware of the other option, of a trust. So what they do is they try to get it done themselves. You can easily go to an office supply store, for instance, and buy some software to make your own will. People aren't aware that there's another option called a living trust. And for the most part, they're the same price. It's the same cost, but there's a lot of benefits and a lot of flexibility with a trust.
How much احنا فهمنا طبعا ال difference between ال will والtrust. ال will الواحد لما يعمل a document ولازم to file it with court، وبعدين يعني بعد الشر لو حاجة حصلت بياخدوا الدوكيومنت دي لو عندكم ولاد. الويل بتحطوا بالاسامي، تحطوا مثلا انتوا عاوزين الحاجات بتاعتكم تروح لمين of the family, right?
Correct.
You can name the you can الوصية
The beneficiaries.
في الويل and then تاخدوها الكورت، وبعدين الكورت هو يوزع الحاجة، صح؟
That's it.
هو والتراست مفيش كورت ومفيش اي حاجه من المواضيع دي.
The great thing about the trust is you don't have to take it to court. You don't need an attorney.
بس is it just as valid as a will?
It's 100% just as valid as a will. As long as it's done correctly, obviously you wouldn't want to do it yourself. There's a lot of formalities that are required. There's witnesses, there's notary,
You can't just write yourself,
You
I will
cannot.
all these things.
California is very specific when it comes to wills and trusts. A lot of people think they can just handwrite something, sign it, and they're fine. But unfortunately, it's not that easy. I've seen it quite often where people think they have a valid will, and ultimately, when we find out it's not valid, it's too late.
So is a will, I'm sorry, not a will, but a trust, is that registered or is that...
No, a will and a trust don't need to be recorded or registered anywhere. A will does need to be submitted to court, as I told you, and it becomes a public document so anyone can see it. A trust is private.
And they can see what's in it, or they just know that...
They can see what's in it, and they can see what...
It's public knowledge, a public record, really?
And that's another reason why people don't want wills, because it's a private matter. You know, if you're leaving something for someone, you want it to be private. You don't want it to be published everywhere.
Honestly, you could just go online and, or how, what do you mean it's public record?
100% you can go online and pull a copy of everybody's will.
Really?
عرفتوا
كده؟ أنا ما كنتش عارفة كده خالص.
A trust is 100% private. There's no courts, there's no attorney. You designate what's called a trustee, which is somebody who comes in upon your passing. They read the document, they understand who gets what and when, and they distribute your assets. And that's really what another benefit for a trust is. A will distributes your assets immediately. Whether you're heir or whether your beneficiary is 15 years old or 30 years old. They're going to get the entire gift instantly. A trust allows you to stagger it. For instance, I have a lot of clients who want payments made to their children at the age of 21, 25, 29, just so that it's not a huge...
So you can specify.
Exactly.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for that. We're just going to take a commercial break, and we'll come back, and we'll have a ton of more questions for you.
Very good.
All right, thank you, and وهنشوفكم بعد الكوميرشال بريك ده. Thank you very much.
مكتب الأستاذة جيهان توماس المحامية.
Law Office of Jihan L. Thomas.
قدم لكم جميع خدمات الهجرة، قضايا اللجوء، خدمات الإقامة عن طريق الأقارب والزواج، قضايا الترحيل أمام محاكم الهجرة،
BIA Appeals.
قضايا الاستئناف والنقد أمام المحاكم الفيدرالية،
Removal, Deportation Hearings, Employment-Based Immigration,
إقامة شرعية عن طريق العمل والاستثمار والبزنس والدراسة.
Citizenship. Address 601 West 5th Street, Suite 333, Los Angeles, California 90071. Phone number 310-203-2242. Fax number 310-203-2287. I will work with you, no matter what. JMJ Jewelers. We buy gold for top dollar. Full service jewelry store. Expert watch and jewelry repairs, all done on premises.
$395 for a complete Rolex service.
Phone number 714-282-7875.
We are located inside the Orange Mall on Tustin Avenue.
Address 1500 East Village Way, Suite 2220, Orange, California 92865.
Facing foreclosure? No equity? No problem. Get fast, free help today. If you're looking for ways to sell your house fast, then we can assist you. Our entire business is about helping homeowners by providing them with alternatives no one else has told them about before. Forget waiting for weeks or even months for a real estate agent to try to sell your home. You don't have that kind of time, and you need peace of mind now. Regardless of your property condition or situation. For more information, please call Direct Homeowner Solutions at 714-752-3696 or email us at rima@directhomeownersolutions.net or jenny@directhomeownersolutions.net.
الآن في أمريكا أكبر باقة قنوات فضائية عربية. ديش نتورك تقدم Arabic Elite Super Pack وأفضل القنوات والبرامج العربية لجميع أفراد العائلة. استمتع بمشاهدة التحرير، الحياة واحد، الجزيرة، اليوم وغيرها ب $44.99 في الشهر. Arabic Elite Super Pack تحتوي على كل ما تبحث عنه في عالم الترفيه التلفزيوني. للاشتراك اتصل اليوم ب International Satellite and Surveillance جورج اسكندر 800-300-0949.
وأيضا لدينا خدمة تركيب الدش للقنوات المسيحية. استمتعوا معنا بالقنوات المسيحية بمبلغ $169 فقط، بالإضافة لمصاريف الشحن.
للاشتراك اتصل اليوم ب International Satellite and Surveillance جورج اسكندر 800-300-0949.
Welcome back. احنا في ردك عندنا، وعندنا جون مورقوس بنتكلم على bankruptcies، وبنتكلم على chapter 13 و 7. انتوا لسه يعني you're still joining us. These are the things we were بنتكلم عليهم. وبعدين دخلنا في state planning. كان بيتكلم على will و trust. فقال لنا الديفرنس الويل لازم يتعمل في الكورت في المحكمة، والويل ممكن يتعمل separately ومش محتاج محكمة صح؟ فدلوقتي هنتكلم أكتر على الويل والتراست علشان دول they seem يعني دي حاجات كلنا لازم نتعلم منها ونشوف إحنا فين وإيه الحاجات اللي ممكن تساعدنا في السيتويشن بتاعتنا. So I have a question about wills. The first one is how can a will and a trust help my beneficiaries when I pass?
Well, if you don't have a will or a trust, you have to go through, again, probate, which means that your beneficiaries would need to go to court, let them know that their parent passed away, and that their parent had assets, and the court orders where those assets will go. And
that's if you don't have a will or a trust.
That's if you don't have a will.
Okay.
And what the court's going to do is look to see if there's any children. If there's any children, everything goes to the children. If there's no children, they look to see if there's any parents, any brothers and sisters, any aunts and uncles, cousins. Ultimately, they're going to see if there's anybody related, and give the assets to that person. If there is no relative, everything goes to the state.
Okay, but if you have a will, then it goes through court, and then your assets are distributed according to what you stated.
Exactly.
So الويل قلنا بتحطوا الأسامي والناس اللي عاوزينهم to inherit your properties and your assets in the will. And you have to go through court to receive all that.
Correct.
Right?
And
okay, now go ahead.
And another benefit of a trust for your beneficiaries is you have complete flexibility on how to structure your trust. And obviously you would need to get a professional involved, but ultimately you can distribute your assets in a way where it saves your beneficiaries quite a bit of taxes. You can structure a trust in a way where you could take advantage of federal and state tax exemptions. You can't do that with a will.
So explain that a little bit to me. What do you mean by you can help your beneficiaries with taxes?
Well, every year the government changes the tax exemption, whether it's $1 million or whether it's $2 million or whether it's $10 million worth of assets. So if you have a significant amount of assets and you want to save your beneficiaries having to pay taxes on those assets, you can organize your trust in a way where it would take advantage of these tax exemptions. And really the way it happens is you create one trust, which ultimately turns into two trusts, which ultimately turns into three trusts. So it takes advantage of that tax exemption 3 times.
So meaning the beneficiaries, when they receive the assets, they don't have to pay taxes on them.
For a certain dollar amount of assets, sure.
Okay, great. And then what about a will?
A will, you have no flexibility whatsoever. You basically tell the court, I want my assets to go to this person, and that's it. Like I said earlier, it doesn't matter how old they are. It doesn't matter what kind of condition or how they're managing their property, whether they're in a bankruptcy, for instance, and now they stand to inherit a great deal of property, which would ultimately be taken by a bankruptcy court. So you have no flexibility. At least with a trust, you can delay distribution, you can do discretionary distribution, which means you can tell the trustee, only distribute this amount under these conditions. So you have way more flexibility.
What if after you wrote a trust, 6 months, a year later, you want to change it? Can you do that?
You have complete flexibility with that. You can always amend a trust. Same with a will. It's not set in stone. You would just need to have either an amendment or a codicil drafted, which will ultimately change the provisions of your will or your trust.
And how long and how much does it cost to create a trust?
A trust can be created. I mean, I've had emergency situations where a client has called me, told me that their grandparent was on their deathbed and they needed a trust right now. And I mean, it's something you can have done same day. Obviously, it's a great deal of work, but depending on the situation and depending on the type of trust, it's something that can be taken care of within a day, 2 days, a few days. Same with a will.
And only attorneys can prepare trusts?
I highly recommend you have some type of professional prepare this document. As I said earlier, California probate is very particular. There needs to be certain disclosures, provisions, witnessing, and if any one of those little nuances is missed, the entire document could be found invalid.
So it's important to have somebody that's what they do for a living, is to create that document for you. Because
I highly say, and if it's something that you didn't have a professional create for you, it's easy to take it to a professional and have it looked at and make sure everything is valid.
Okay, and how much does it cost?
It ranges. As I told you, there's very complex trusts that take advantage of federal tax exemptions. And there's simple trusts. I mean, there could be one person who wants to create a trust and they want everything to go to their one child and they don't have much. Something like that could range from $500 to $600, or a complex trust, the most complex trust, can reach somewhere around $1,500 or so.
And does a trust expire?
A trust technically does expire. There's a certain amount of years it could carry on after your passing, but it's a rare occasion for it to stay open that long. Typically, trusts are distributed within a few years, but if it's written correctly and if it's structured correctly, it could last for as long as you need it to last.
Okay, so at what point and how much money can a person have, or should they have, before they start thinking, okay, this is probably a good time to make a trust or will?
It really doesn't come down to money. It really comes down to exactly what the definition is: estate planning. It's mainly planning. It's not about who gets what. For instance, in a trust, you could designate a guardian. If you have minor children, and if you pass away and your children are still minors, they need to have a legal guardian. And you could designate a legal guardian in a trust and make sure that they're taken care of upon your passing. Not only that, estate planning typically has power of attorneys, health care directives, which ultimately allows somebody else to take care of your assets. Let's say you're in the hospital, you can't manage your own financial affairs, and you haven't passed away. A trust allows you to designate somebody, a family member, a friend, somebody you trust, to pay your bills for you with your accounts, or to make medical decisions for you if you're unable to make it.
That's a living trust?
A living trust allows you the flexibility to do all that.
So while you are well and everything is good in your life, you can make a living will and for the times that you can't make your own decisions and somebody makes them for you?
A living trust.
Or
yeah.
a living trust, sorry.
Right. A will doesn't cover any of that. Granted, you could designate a guardian for your minor child if something happens to you, but you don't get the full flexibility that a trust offers, which, again, is having a power of attorney and a healthcare directive.
And what age should somebody get a trust?
I've had people as young as in their 20s get a trust. And again, it's mainly just planning. I mean, if a young couple has children, you know, and they want to make sure that child's going to be taken care of should something happen to them. Let's say they travel a lot and they worry that something may happen while they're flying or what have you. You know, at least they can set a plan and make sure that if something happens to them, their child is taken care of, you know, and everything's going to be taken care of.
So is there a downside of having a trust?
There's no downside whatsoever. Again, a trust is fully revocable. So if one day you decide, I don't want a trust anymore, you can revoke it and
Just
make
tear
it
the paper,
disappear.
yeah.
Not necessarily tear it up. You need
No.
to formally revoke it.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's something that you're not tied into, but in my eyes, there's no downside.
So putting all of your assets in a trust, does that protect you from, let's say, if you had a property in a trust?
Sure.
Can a bankruptcy affect your property inside the trust?
You know, a lot of people, for some reason, believe that when they have a trust, they don't own those assets anymore, so that way if they get sued, they won't be able to touch those assets. It's completely not true. So whether it's in a trust or whether it's not in the trust, it's exactly the same situation. So a bankruptcy can go after those assets in a trust.
Really?
It would not make a difference.
So it doesn't protect you from...
You know, there's one minor detail here. We're talking about revocable trusts. There's one thing we haven't discussed, which is an irrevocable trust. It's a trust that once you sign it, you can't change it and you can't revoke it. It's set in stone, and that type of situation would be one where no one can touch those assets.
Okay, let me explain that. There are في نوعين trust. في واحد ممكن تلغوه وفي واحد ما بيتلغيش. فلو حطيتوا الاسيتس في اللي بيتلغي, so if you put it in the revocable trust, that's when they're not 100% protected.
It's not protected whatsoever.
Okay, from bankruptcy specifically.
It's as if you own it yourself.
Oh, okay.
Which is true.
But irrevocable, that one they cannot touch.
But it's a document I highly, highly suggest against, because again, you're basically signing over all your property once you sign that document.
So who owns that trust?
Whoever is the beneficiary. Let's say I create an irrevocable trust, one that I can't revoke, and I make my brother my beneficiary. Once I sign that document, he owns everything I just gave him. During my lifetime. It's not upon my death. It's during my lifetime. So it's as good as giving away your assets while you're still living. And ultimately, people still need to enjoy their assets. They need a place to live.
Right.
They need money to, you know, to pay their expenses. So
when would you get an irrevocable?
It's a rare occasion, and usually it's some type of older person, a senior, who just wants a place to live. They're happy with their Social Security or what have you, their limited income, and they want to see that their beneficiaries take those assets now. While they're living. And that would be a situation.
So which one would you recommend?
An irrevocable trust, 100%. I typically recommend against an irrevocable trust unless it's absolutely necessary.
Okay, let's go back to bankruptcies a little bit,
Sure.
because there was a couple of questions that I didn't ask. If I file a bankruptcy, who will it affect? Will it affect my husband, let's say?
Well, that's a good question. A lot of people think that when they file bankruptcy, their spouse is dragged into the process, and that's absolutely not true. A lot of people have debt that's just in their name before they got married, let's say. And that type of debt you can discharge by yourself. So you can file bankruptcy and not include your husband, for instance, if it's just things that are just in your name, credit cards, a mortgage, what have you. So no, it wouldn't affect your husband in certain circumstances, of course.
So what about community property?
Community property, and that's why I mentioned before marriage. If you have assets or debts prior to marriage, obviously that's your separate debt. You don't bring that into the marriage unless it's something that your husband co-signed for. But if it's just in your name and it's something that you acquired prior to marriage, you can definitely file bankruptcy during your marriage, and not include your spouse. And it's
Okay,
something.
so we have a couple, for example, and one of them is filing bankruptcy, but they have a house, they've got several cars, they've got a couple of credit cards with both of their names. Now, when he files bankruptcy, that doesn't hurt her at all. He can file separately from all of her.
You have the complete option to file separately, but what happens is, let's say he puts some of the community debt in there, a credit card that they had both their names on. If he puts it in the bankruptcy, he will get a discharge from that credit card, but the spouse is still going to owe the debt. So it's not going to disappear altogether.
The spouse will still owe the debt.
The non-filing spouse is still going to own the debt.
So she'll carry all the debt.
So what happens is it knocks your name off of anything you're on, whether it's a joint debt or a separate debt, and ultimately, the non-filing party is going to be responsible for any joint debt. But anything that filer had prior to marriage or just in their name is going to get wiped away, and no one's going to be responsible for it.
Okay, this is not something that we really like to talk about, but just in case, what if somebody is separating or divorcing, and after the divorce, one of the spouses files for bankruptcy? Is that going to affect then after the divorce?
And honestly, it's probably the most common time for filing bankruptcy. Typically, once a divorce is over and they separate debt, they separate assets, that's typically when people file bankruptcy.
And then it will show on the spouse's credit report that there was
The non-filing party? No.
Yes.
No. If they're not included in the bankruptcy, they're not going to be affected by it.
Okay. Okay, great. Wow, I've learned so much about. But I hear a lot of people go through bankruptcies, and it's something that's becoming more and more. But it almost seems seasonal. Do you have seasons?
It's funny. There are seasons. Typically, no one wants to deal with bankruptcy during the holidays. So December's out of the question. Easter's out of the question. I want to say the most common times to file bankruptcy in the busy season is the summer. I have teachers who are off of work and they want to get this resolved. People with more free time, children are out of school, they have more free time to take care of this process. So summertime is probably the most busy time for bankruptcy.
Wow.
But it is a year-round process, but you obviously see waves throughout the year, I'm sure.
Yes. And how long after a bankruptcy can somebody go buy a house without any problems?
Everybody believes that they're not going to qualify for a home loan for 10 years. But I have clients, again, immediately after filing bankruptcy, they're getting credit card offers. I have clients a year after filing bankruptcy getting car loans, sometimes sooner. And I have clients 2 years after filing bankruptcy getting home loans. And obviously, it's dependent on how you manage your credit. I mean, as long as you're responsible, you're charging your credit and you're paying it off. The more balance you carry over, obviously, the lower credit score you're going to have. But if you responsibly take care of your credit, within 2 years, you'd be able to qualify for a home loan.
So the way to do it is after somebody files bankruptcies is to keep really good credit after. That's really the most important.
Right, and that's key because the catch with bankruptcy is you could only file once every 8 years. So
either chapter?
You can only file any chapter once every 8 years. You can file Chapter 7 today and not be able to file any chapter for the next 8 years. So you have to be responsible when you file bankruptcy because you don't have that option anymore until 8 years.
And can you file bankruptcy and then change your mind?
It happens. Sometimes people want to revoke their bankruptcy or pull it out. You can do it to an extent. If you let it carry on for too long, at that point the trustee of the bankruptcy court has the option of making you continue your bankruptcy. And a lot of times they only do that when they think there's some type of fraud involved. A lot of people think, I need to file bankruptcy today just so I could stop the sale of my house.
That's a good topic to talk about because I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that because I have heard and there was actually a wave of that to save people's homes.
Right.
They'd file bankruptcy.
It happens all the time.
How do they do that? What happens?
I mean, granted, when you file bankruptcy, it stops all your creditors from any collection attempt, and that includes selling your property.
So there's no way, once you file that bankruptcy, there's no way they'll foreclose on your house.
They cannot. They would have to file a motion with the bankruptcy court asking for permission to move forward with the sale. And it's going to take months. Or their other option would be wait till your bankruptcy is over with and then continue to sell your house. So, you know, it buys time. But again, the courts are onto that trend, and they deem that invalid. It's an invalid purpose to file bankruptcy just to stall a foreclosure or a sale date.
And you could only file once. So once you file,
Right.
even though you change your mind or you
Well, if you change your mind and you withdraw your petition,
Yes.
you still have the option of filing again.
Okay.
You get one discharge every 8 years, which is a discharge is basically the bankruptcy court granting your bankruptcy.
I see. And we also wanted to find out about Chapter 7. Is it the same? Is it the same thing? Once you apply for it, you can also withdraw.
You can always withdraw, again, to an extent. If the bankruptcy court believes you're filing for improper reasons, they may carry it through just to determine whether you had an improper reason. But again, if it's something you file one day and withdraw, you know, the next day, typically there's no issues with that. But if you let it go on too long...
What's too long?
Well, the process is like this. You file your petition. Within 4 weeks, you have a hearing. It's your only hearing in the bankruptcy. Once you pass that hearing, the trustee is now involved in your case. And at that point, you'd have to ask permission to withdraw your case. And that, obviously, the trustee is going to have to examine your situation and determine whether it's an improper withdrawal or not.
So from the time you file to the time that it goes to court,
It's 4 weeks.
4 weeks.
4 to 5
so
weeks
they give you
typically.
those 4 weeks in case you change your mind and you don't want to file anymore.
Sure.
You can withdraw.
Sure.
But anytime after that,
You have to ask permission.
I see. And it goes for both.
It goes for both,
Okay.
sure.
Okay, so what else can you tell us that maybe I can't think of a question right now, or what can you tell us that you would tell people that are in financial hardship and they can't pay their bills and they don't want to lose their home? How would you advise them which way to go?
Well, I would think that the biggest question I get in bankruptcy is, can I keep my property? Can I keep my 401k? Can I keep my car? Can I keep my bank accounts? Can I keep my furniture? A lot of people think, oh, I have to give everything to the trustee and they're going to sell everything I own. Not true. The bankruptcy allows you to keep certain assets. They're called exemptions. They give you certain exemptions for your car, a dollar figure. I want to say it's about $3,500 for your car. They give you $23,000 to cover whatever you want. They give you a homestead exemption, which protects the equity in your house. They have an unlimited exemption for your retirement, your IRA. So if you have $100,000 in your pension or your retirement, all that is exempt.
So exempt means you don't have to include it in the bankruptcy and you can keep it.
You can
That's
keep
what
it.
it means.
I want to say in all the filings I've done, it's probably been one situation where they just had a little too much assets and had to write a check over to the trustee, which was a couple $1,000s. But for the most part, the bankruptcy court provides you with enough exemptions to protect all your assets, your car, your house, your furniture, your clothing, all that. Your furniture and your clothing is 100% exempt no matter how much it's worth. Like I said, your pension and retirement, 100% exempt no matter how much it's worth. So we have enough flexibility to put all your assets under that exemption umbrella, and at the end of the day, you keep what you need and your debt disappears. So it's a plus-plus.
So there's not a certain amount of how much you can exempt.
There is a certain amount.
There is.
Don't get me wrong. There's certain assets that the exemption is unlimited. As I said, the pension, the retirement, your clothing, your furniture.
That you can
unlimited.
have. Okay.
Unlimited. The rest, there's certain caps, we can say. Like I said, there's a certain dollar figure for cars. There's a certain dollar figure for your equity in
So
your
what
house.
happens if your car is worth, or you owe, let's say, $50,000 on it, and they only exempt $20,000?
So in that situation, we can move around exemptions in a way where you know, we can borrow from one exemption and use it for a property. But if it does get to the point where we can't fit all your property under those exemptions, as I said, in that one case, you know, my client had to write a check to the trustee. But again, there's enough exemptions for you to keep quite a bit of property. So anything over than that, we would know that before we even file. We would know what's exempt and what's not exempt, and we would make that decision. Let's say, you know, $30,000 in your example of equity in the car would have to be turned over to the trustee. So we would look, how much debt do we have? Is it $100,000 of debt? Is it worth it to turn over $30,000 in exchange for a release of $100,000 of debt? Sure, it would make sense for some people. So again, it's a case-by-case analysis, but it's a rare occasion for somebody that needs to file bankruptcy that has too much assets. It's a rare occasion.
Okay, so now for all our viewers, if they want to get in touch with you and they have personal questions, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, my office is here in Irvine. If you have any questions, by all means, give me a call.
Or you can call the number on the screen right there. And if you have any questions, we've got just a few minutes left. Let's start. Well, we've talked enough about bankruptcies and trusts and will. So what do you do when you're not bankrupting people?
when I'm not working, you know, I love the beach. I'm a beach bum, so whether I'm walking to the beach, biking to the beach, or surfing at the beach, I love to be at the beach. And if not, I'd be traveling.
So you spend all summer long at the beach?
Yeah, I was there this morning.
It's
so,
therapy,
yeah.
isn't it?
Oh, it is. It is.
It's a very stressful job, what you have. I mean, it's an emotional job, I would think.
It is at times, sure. There's definitely cases where I get emotionally involved and want to make sure that my clients are taken care of. I mean, it is a passion of mine. It doesn't really feel like a job to me. You know, I enjoy what I do, and you know, I'm glad I chose this career.
Yeah, you feel like you found your niche.
Right. Yeah.
Helping people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Well, is there anything else that you want us to know about your firm or finances? Give us some advice. How can we avoid being in this situation to begin with?
Well, good financial planning is obviously the key. You obviously don't want to spend more than you're making. So sitting down and kind of breaking down what's coming in and what's going out is probably the simplest solution to figure out where you're headed.
Means, yes.
Very true, very true. And that's really what caused, obviously, the economy to collapse here a few years ago. It's people kind of borrowing more than they can afford, and, you know.
It was so easy. They made money so cheap. And
right,
it was
right. That's really what it came down to, and now everybody's paying for it, unfortunately. But, you know, good financial planning is definitely key.
Okay. So we do good financial. Do you recommend that this is a good time to buy?
For a property?
Yes.
Sure. Interest rates are low. They're low 3s, high 2s, and yeah, property values have become very reasonable. So it's definitely a good time to buy. Sure.
Great. Well, okay, John Morkos. John Morkos gave us a lot of information today about bankruptcies. I hope it was helpful. طبعا أنا حاولت أترجم لكم بالعربي بس هي الصراحة صعبة بالنسبة لي. في كلام كتيرة ما كنتش عارفة أترجمه بالعربي فعدينا عليه شوية. بس عاوزين نشكركم كلكم for joining us هنا عند ردنا ردك عندنا. ونشكركم خالص، وإن شاء الله هنشوفكم قريب. وعندنا some exciting shows coming up ahead, and hope you join us. John?
Yes.
Morkos, thank you. I really want to thank you for being here today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And I hope you don't mind coming back again.
Of course. Of course.
With some more helpful information. And
I would love to.
Great.